For 13 years, the trucks rolled in every Thursday without fail, often as early as 7:30, occasionally later but never too late. The drivers never lingered. They pulled up to the fence, tipped their beds, emptied loads of rough-cut white oak, and vanished back to the lumber yard. Most assumed Margaret Hale despised these visits. She didn't. She anticipated them, for each delivery brought a fresh possibility. The peculiar arrangement began in 1992 when Margaret inherited 85 acres from her grandfather, Samuel Hale. The land bordered the county lumber yard. For years, the mill grappled with a singular issue: short offcuts, twisted slats, live-edge remnants, wide pieces too valuable to burn yet too irregular to sell as standard lumber. Hauling them to a landfill cost money. Burning them squandered hardwood. One drenching afternoon, the yard's manager knocked on Margaret's door. He pulled off his cap. "Afternoon," Margaret smiled. "Come in." Instead, he gestured toward the fence. "We've got a question." Silence. "Then what kind?" He scratched his neck. "Mind if we dump oak behind your north pasture?" Margaret frowned. "Why? We're paying to haul it away." A long pause. "So," he shrugged, "if you've got room." Margaret glanced across the pasture. The back corner lay untouched, rocky, poorly drained, rarely visited. "How much?" the manager chuckled. "More than you'd believe." Margaret smiled. "Fine." Neither realized they just altered the next 2 decades. The first truck arrived the following Thursday, then another the week after, then another. The piles inched upward. Most pieces seemed worthless, crooked, uneven, odd lengths, bark clamped to the edges. Neighbors dismissed them as junk. Others labeled them firewood. Samuel called them something else. One evening when Margaret was 16, she trailed him to the expanding heaps. He lifted a thick white oak slab, stroked its grain, then grinned. "Pretty." Margaret laughed. "This?" Samuel nodded. "Most beautiful board here." She looked again. It felt rough, malformed, unfinished. "What do you see?" Samuel angled it toward the sun. Golden light spilled across the grain, revealing intricate swirls beneath the rough surface. "Furniture." Margaret frowned. "Nobody could craft with that." Samuel chuckled. The tree had already done the hardest part. Years later, those words never left her. After Samuel died, Margaret inherited more than land. She inherited his woodworking shed, aging hand planes, cabinet makers' chisels, woodworking tomes, and dozens of journals. Some chronicled furniture designs. Others detailed drying techniques, joinery, wood movement, finishing oils. One sentence recurred endlessly: straight boards build houses. Interesting boards build heirlooms. Margaret read it until it became a blueprint. The lumber trucks kept arriving every Thursday. The oak piles swelled. Folks ribbed her relentlessly. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper peered out the window at Margaret's truck. "There she is." Rick glanced up. "The lumber lady." Dale nodded. "The junk collector." Laughter bubbled around the booth. Not cruel, merely comfortable. The sort reserved for folks everyone thought they'd unraveled. A farmer asked, "How much firewood you got now?" Margaret smiled. "Too much," Dale laughed. "You planning to heat the county?" A pause. "No." "What then?" Margaret gazed toward the hills. "Tables." The table erupted louder than before. "Tables. From scrap." "Those crooked boards." Margaret simply nodded. No one believed her, not yet. She'd never sold furniture, never run a workshop, never advertised anything, at least not yet. The following winter, she reopened Samuel's journals. Each evening she practiced pin-cut dovetails, mortise and tenon joints, tabletop glue-ups. Hours stretched into weeks, weeks into months. The first table looked terrible. The second, slightly less so. The third, nearly level. By the 15th, something shifted. The grain, character, live edges everyone deemed defects suddenly gleamed. Margaret stopped seeing scrap. She began seeing stories. One evening her younger brother Nathan wandered into the workshop, saw wood shavings carpeting the floor and half-finished tables leaning against every wall. He paused, then laughed. "You're doing it again." Margaret looked up. "What?" "The workshop." Silence. "The workshop." Nathan smiled. "That means you're obsessed." A beat. "Then, probably." He picked up a finished tabletop, traced its smooth oak surface. "This came from the pile." Margaret nodded. "Thursday's delivery." Nathan glanced back toward the fence. "I'd have burned it." "I know." Spring brought the county craft fair. Margaret secured the smallest booth she could find. One dining table, 2 benches, nothing else. People admired them, touched the grain, asked questions. No purchases. The drive home felt hollow. Nathan tried cheering her up. They liked them, Margaret sighed. They didn't buy them, he shrugged. They remembered them, she doubted it. The second fair yielded one sale. A retired couple bought a dining table, insisting on cash. Margaret loaded it into their trailer herself. As they drove away, she watched quietly, not for the money, but because someone wanted something she'd crafted. Orders trickled in slowly. Restaurants requested larger tables. A bed and breakfast ordered 6. A local winery sought tasting room furniture. Margaret never advertised. Every order arrived through word of mouth. Reputation spread gently as she preferred. Meanwhile, the lumber trucks continued their Thursday pilgrimage. The piles never shrank. Each load housed another future tabletop, another bench, another dream. One humid July afternoon, a furniture designer touring the winery paused at one of Margaret's oak tables. He studied it for 20 minutes, then asked the owner, "Who made this?" The owner grinned. "Local woman." "Can I meet her?" 3 days later, the designer arrived at Margaret's workshop. He paced the building, inspecting stacks of slats, drying racks, finished pieces, all silently. Finally, he stopped beside a completed dining table, ran both hands along its grain, then smiled. "This isn't scrap wood." Margaret crossed her arms. "I know." The designer eyed the towering oak piles behind the fence, then back. "You have enough material here for years." Margaret nodded. "Probably." A pause, then the pivotal question. "Have you ever considered selling outside the county?" The words lingered in Margaret's mind all week. Until that moment, she'd never taken it seriously. The workshop kept her busy enough. Every table sold before she finished the next. Restaurants recommended her. Lodges ordered matching sets. Families waited months for custom pieces. Steady, comfortable. The designer circled the workshop again. Stacks of drying oak lined one wall. Finished tabletops leaned carefully against another. Outside, another truck from the lumber yard rolled toward the familiar dumping spot. The driver waved. Margaret waved back. The designer smiled. "You know, most companies pay thousands for lumber like this." Margaret gazed at the fresh pile. "I've never paid $1. He laughed softly. "That's exactly why you should think bigger." A month later, he invited Margaret to a regional furniture exhibition. At first she refused. Then Nathan persuaded her. "You've got nothing to lose." She lashed 3 dining tables onto a borrowed trailer, 1 farmhouse, 1 live-edge modern, 1 traditional trestle. Every piece came from what others called scrap. The hall loomed intimidatingly. Giant furniture companies dominated with sleek displays, professional lighting, sales teams. Margaret's booth held 3 tables, a folding chair, and a handwritten sign. She expected little. Instead, people kept stopping. Not for the sign, but for the wood. Visitors traced the flowing grain, studied natural edges, asked where the oak originated. Margaret always answered the same way. "Behind my fence." Most assumed she was joking. By day's end, all 3 tables sold. By day 2, she collected enough business cards to fill an entire notebook. Interior designers, boutique hotels, restaurant owners, architects. One buyer asked, "Can you produce more?" Margaret hesitated. "I think so." The next year transformed everything. She expanded the workshop not into a factory but into a larger craftsmanship studio. 3 local woodworkers joined her, then 2 more. Young artisans who preferred building furniture to framing houses. Every Thursday the trucks arrived. Only now the piles vanished almost as quickly as they formed. One afternoon the lumber yard manager stopped by. He watched employees sort fresh white oak, then laughed. "You know," Margaret looked up. "What? We used to pay thousands monthly to discard this." She smiled. "I remember." He shook his head. "And now we're delivering your inventory." Margaret laughed. "Looks that way." County remained puzzled, at least publicly. People noticed more workers, trailers, deliveries, but assumed Margaret simply had a busy hobby. The nickname shifted. She was no longer the junk collector. Now the table lady. Jokes persisted. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper watched another trailer loaded with finished furniture roll past. "There goes another table," Rick laughed. "How many people need tables?" Margaret walked in just then. Dale smiled. "Business good," Margaret nodded. "Very. Still making tables from garbage." "Still," he chuckled. "I'll never understand it." Margaret smiled politely. "You don't have to." 2 years later, a photographer from a national home design magazine visited the workshop. He spent the afternoon capturing furniture, oak piles, hand tools, aging drying sheds. He loved the story almost as much as the pieces. When the article published, something unexpected unfolded. Design blogs picked it up, then interior designers, then buyers nationwide. Emails flooded in faster than Margaret could respond. Waiting lists stretched to 8 months. Nathan entered the office carrying another stack of orders. He dropped them on her desk. "You're going to need help." Margaret studied the pile. "I know, lots of help," she smiled. "I know." The biggest surprise arrived 6 months later. An executive from a major furniture retailer requested a visit. Margaret nearly declined. She assumed someone else would handle accounts that size. Instead, a small team arrived one rainy Tuesday morning. They toured every building, examined joinery, observed sanding, studied finishing. At last, the lead buyer stopped beside a massive white oak dining table, rested both hands on its surface, closed his eyes briefly, then smiled. "This is exactly what we seek." Margaret stayed silent. The buyer continued, "We're launching a collection built on authentic American craftsmanship." A pause. "We want your tables in it." Silence settled over the workshop. Nathan looked at Margaret. Margaret glanced out the window at the giant oak piles, then back. "You're serious?" The buyer smiled. "Very." Negotiations dragged on for months. Margaret insisted on keeping production local. No overseas manufacturing, no particle board, no veneers, solid American white oak, hand-finished. The retailer agreed. Orders began the following spring. For the first time, dining tables born from discarded oak behind Margaret's fence graced elegant showrooms nationwide. The county learned only later. One Saturday, Dale Harper and his wife shopped for furniture in the city. His wife suddenly stopped. "Dale." "What?" She pointed. A massive live-edge white oak dining table sat beneath chandeliers in a furniture store. A small plaque read, "Margaret Hale Workshop." Dale stepped closer, read it twice, then once more. "No." His wife smiled. "I think that's your table, lady." The drive home felt oddly quiet. Monday morning, the diner buzzed earlier than usual. Dale carried a furniture catalog, placed it on the counter. "No." Rick looked up. "What now?" Dale opened the catalog. Stunning photographs filled the pages. Centered among them, Margaret's dining table. The room fell silent. Someone whispered, "She built that." Dale nodded slowly. "From the lumber piles." By lunchtime, the entire county knew. That afternoon, the lumber yard manager delivered another truckload of white oak. This time, several employees climbed down first. They stood quietly, gazing toward the workshop. Machines hummed inside. Craftsmen assembled another dining table with care. Forklifts moved carefully stacked slabs. Finished furniture waited for shipment. One employee shook his head. "We've been throwing away a furniture business for 13 years. The manager smiled. "Looks like we have." One autumn evening, Nathan stood beside Margaret, overlooking the property. The familiar oak piles stretched behind the north fence, smaller now but never gone. Beyond them, the expanded workshop buzzed with activity. Delivery trucks loaded finished furniture. Employees locked up for the evening. The scent of fresh-cut white oak drifted through the cool air. Nathan folded his arms. "You know what still bothers me?" Margaret smiled. "What?" "They called it junk." "Yes, for years, yes." He looked toward the workshop. They laughed. Margaret nodded. "I know." Long silence stretched between them. Finally, Nathan asked, "So what did Grandpa actually see?" Margaret picked up a rough oak slab from the newest delivery. Bark clung to the edges. The wood twisted unnaturally. Most would call it firewood. She turned it toward the fatting sun. Golden rays illuminated spectacular swirling grain hidden beneath the rough surface, just as Samuel had done years before. She smiled. He saw the table concealed within the tree. For 13 years, the lumber yard believed it was paying to discard waste. The county thought Margaret collected scrap. Neighbors saw firewood, crooked boards, useless cutoffs. Margaret saw something entirely different: possibility, patience, craftsmanship. Every Thursday, another truck backed to the fence and unloaded what everyone else had rejected. One board at a time, one table at a time, one customer at a time, until the wood once destined for the landfill became handcrafted dining tables admired across the country. Because sometimes the greatest value isn't found in seeking better materials. It's created by seeing what everyone else has already decided isn't worth seeing.